So Louise, thank you so much for being here. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you so much, JD. And JD, I just want to say thank you to you for putting so much time and effort into this conference. This is such a blessing to, I think, all the different parts of the body of Christ, from us as practitioners to people thinking about where they want to go. So just thank you, JD. And I've been attending talks over the past few days, I think one thing at the beginning is just to say, people like me can overanalyze, and you come to all these talks and you're like, yes, and then you're like, yes, and yes, and yes. And my number one thing is just say yes and do something, and don't try to tie yourself in knots about what's the perfect thing, because there's not one, but just kind of an encouragement right off the bat, just to say, the fact that you're here is already really an amazing obedience, and just want to encourage you in that. So my name is Louise. I have a difficult last name. I just gave JD a cheat sheet. But I want to start by introducing my 6-year-old self. So this was taken in Streatham, about 8 miles from here. And as you can see, I wanted to be a singer as a child. I loved performing, and I hoped for any stage, the bigger the better. And so this is 1996. Now we're cut to almost 30 years later. And this is a photo of the stage where I was putting on a show. But the cool part, and why I wanted to show you this, is because it wasn't just my voice that people were there to hear. In fact, it wasn't really about me at all. It was about the performance of a group of ultra-poor Filipino children who I had the chance to train in singing and be part of their teenage years and into their early adulthood. And we were performing there for 20,000 people in Cebu in the Philippines. And I think it's just an amazing part of God's sense of humor, where he gives you dreams and passions and then takes them in a very different direction to where you think you want to go. And so in my work alongside my husband, Mihao, we have had the chance to, I moved to the Philippines when I was just 20 years old. And so we've had the chance to spend, as JD said, thousands and thousands of hours sitting and talking with people that we serve. Initially, we got involved in the video side, marketing and events production, and we've done, I'll just flick through some really quick photos. There's an interesting story behind each of these things, but we've shot musical, I've written raps for young kids, done dance competitions, and helped put on really interesting and inspiring events, which ultimately helped to generate hundreds of millions of dollars for an organization which, as JD's words, not mine, is one of the most impactful Christian anti-poverty organizations. So let me tell you a little bit about ICM, International Care Ministries, and what we do. So, but before I kind of get into what we do, I think just thinking about that idea of, God has given us, each of you, a really unique set of skills. He's given you a unique personality. He's given you unique passions. And we have an opportunity, or perhaps a responsibility, right, to use those passions in the way that is most impactful. So at ICM, we take what we call a business approach to fighting poverty. So we want to be 4 things. We want to be focused on helping the ultra-poor. We want to be effective in what we do. We want to be efficient, and we want to be scalable. Probably a lot of charities would say yes to all of those, but we really try and take a focus on each of those. We were started in the Philippines in 1992 by Filipinos, so by a group of ultra-poor pastors, but we were adopted by a group of investment bankers in 1997 from Hong Kong. And so since then, those investment bankers have helped to really scale up the work that we do. And so 5 years ago, we launched in Uganda, recently in Guatemala, and just getting started in Burundi and Cambodia as well. We have, as I said, our leaders are all business people. They're all Christians. They bring a lot of Christian and business wisdom to the work that we do. Our focus, as I said, is on serving the ultra-poor. So a lot of you would have heard the term extreme poverty. So 26 million Filipinos live in poverty. 7 million live in a level called ultra-poverty. And I think these numbers have actually even shifted a little bit higher recently, but ultra-poverty is a level, if extreme poverty is a level that threatens someone's survival, ultra-poverty we say is around 50 US cents per person per day, which is about 1/6 now of the current level of extreme poverty. And so I think if you try to imagine that, like you and I can't understand what that looks like. It basically means not having enough food, not knowing where the next meal is coming from, not having a good roof over your head. And it really means, as a parent, having to make a horrible decision almost every hour. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Do I send my child to school? Or do I pay the electricity bill? And our strategy at ICM is we really believe that God has given the world an amazing distribution network to reach the people who are in these very difficult to reach places, which is the local church. So we work through pastors. We build a network and we currently have a network of about 20,000 pastors in the Philippines who are connected with ICM on an ongoing basis, and we do some theological training for them, some leadership training for them. And for some of those pastors, that's their only involvement with ICM, is us blessing them. But for about 1,500 of those 20,000 pastors a year, they'll say, hey, I want to reach the poorest people in my community. And so they'll take this Transform program, which launches hope in communities. And then after that 4-month program, then the pastor is the ongoing point of contact for sustainability. So we say that hope is the key. Like, how do you help? How do you even start instilling change in someone who is facing extremely difficult decisions every day? 43% of the people that we serve say that they feel worthless. How do you give someone a program and say, hey, change your life, when they're not, they don't feel hope, eternal or for tomorrow? So we start with hope. Hope starts with the heart. So we do a lot of social capital building. The pastor who's hosting the program will share the gospel, share some discipleship things. We do a lot of small group discussions and just trying to both give hope for eternity and also hope for tomorrow and for next month and next year. The next thing that we teach in that Transform class for 4 months is about how to grow a sustainable income. So we start with, you've probably all heard about microfinance, and sort of that level of investment is for someone who's already perhaps got a business which is running, already has a bit of money management skill. The people that we're serving, are really living hand to mouth and wouldn't really know even what capital means or how to save for the future. So we teach small businesses, we help people to earn more income, and we help them to save and save as a community. So after 4 months of our Transform program, people who are living in ultra poverty double their income. The income increases by 107%. They're still poor. They're not ultra poor. Physical health is obviously something which can have a huge impact on knocking people backwards in the fight out of poverty. If you have a medical emergency, often it kind of takes you way back and you have to get into debt to pay money, or you can't work. And so it's really important that, thinking about health, it's both a cause of poverty and a consequence of poverty. So we do a basic public health curriculum, but we also treat people's needs as they come up. So every community will screen all the children for malnutrition, and anyone who is malnourished will get treated. We help pregnant mothers with nutrition and basic things. And if anyone's in really serious medical need, we also have a special fund for medical surgeries. So we do about 2,500 surgeries every year for people with more serious medical needs. And the last thing we do, HOPE, E is for education. So we have a early childhood education program, which we call Family Academy. And this one, we just got an RCT published last year, which says that this is in Oxford University, the professor's research said that this is the most effective program for the amount of dollars that he's ever seen, which was really exciting for him and really exciting for us. So great evidence coming out of that one as well. So focused, efficient, effective, and the last thing is scalable. So these are global numbers. So this is Philippines plus the other countries that we're starting in. Graduated 2.2 million people. That's family members. So that's one family is average 5 people have gone through the program. We have 5,300 savings groups who've got a collective $9.1 million of assets between them, and we're over 20,000 kids who've been educated through Family Academy. We partner with lots of amazing research people, and I think ICM really sees ourselves as, obviously our first calling is to the ultra poor and to the local church, but we also see a secondary kind of calling of how can we be an organization in the faith-based space who, also puts emphasis on research and helps to kind of help some other faith-based organizations think about, how can we as Christians be as excellent as we can in research as what is happening in the secular world. So we'll get to some questions in a second, but just one thing which we're really excited about, which is kind of breaking news for us, is we've just completed our first randomized control trial in Uganda. So we've done lots of RCTs in the Philippines, positive results, which kind of led us to say, hey, let's try this Philippine launch strategy. Let's try it somewhere else. And Uganda was the first place that we went to because it has lots of poverty. It has an amazing local church. And so it had all of the conditions that would make it ideal for ICM. And so a lot of you probably know graduation. So graduation is I would say, global accepted standard for serving the ultra poor. And so graduation has done multi-country RCT and is now a huge model across the world, rolled out by lots of governments as well as nonprofits. And graduation sees, on average, obviously different contexts, different numbers, but on average about a 20% increase in income, and it costs about $1,000 per family. ICM's recent RCT in Uganda, we saw an 80% in household income after 6 months. And the cost is $100 per household. So we're seeing, 4 times the impact of graduation, and we're seeing we were able to provide that for 10% of the graduation cost. And so it's a 40 times ROI on graduation. And really, of course, it's because of some good business strategies and other things, but really it's because we're able to do this through the local church with local volunteers, alongside ICM staff members who are paid very modestly. So that's a little bit of an introduction. I had 10 minutes. I hope I didn't go too long.
That's great.
But I think, JD and I will chat for a little while and then we'll take some questions. So thank you.
That's great. So Louise, I want to take a step back and look at again, for those of us in the room who aren't familiar with the latest and greatest in development and the graduation approach, but maybe have this sense that a holistic approach to helping those in extreme poverty is really important. In simple terms, what is the graduation approach and what is Transform, which is very much based on that? Maybe walk us through kind of the nuts and bolts of what that has.
Sure. So I think, if we're looking at poverty as a problem, I kind of touched on a few different areas. There's shelter, there's health, there's income, and then there's a lot of the social, the emotional side, and then there's the spiritual side, that Christians would see as spiritual poverty. A lot of organizations tend to focus on one, and I think Graydon, if anyone was listening to Graydon earlier, he was talking about sometimes it's better to just focus on one thing because you can do it well, and you can do it cheaply, and you can do it at scale. For the ultra poor, so much of life is interconnected, and so if you just, for example, fix someone's roof, but you don't help them with income, when the roof is broken again in a few years' time, then they're not really in a better place. And so we talk about a holistic approach to solving poverty, but at the same time, you can't cheaply fix all of those problems or help solve all of those problems. And so our approach as an organization was, what's the most scalable thing and what are the lowest cost interventions that we can put within that thing? And so Transform really takes training. Training is super scalable, right? And with the internet and the digital age becoming more reality in the Philippines and other low-income countries as well, can be even more scalable. And so we have this concept of, okay, the thing that costs us money is to get there, right? We send 2 ICM staff to a community once a week for 4 months. And that is probably the highest cost, right? It's the staff time, the van or the motorbike to get there, some petrol. Once they're there, and we've got our people, what can we put in that box that's gonna, change as many areas of their life as possible? And so the pastor is obviously there already and helping to deal with some of the spiritual and social elements of poverty. And then we have one person dedicated to health who both teaches and screens and treats. And then we have a livelihood person who's really focused on the economics and the savings and the income generation. And so it's what else can we put in there? And so it's we've recently started doing some vitamin interventions for pregnant mothers, and we've seen the low birth weight incidence drop by 50%. So tons of things going into that, but then it's a 4-month intervention. Once we're done, you guys are graduated, you're on the path, let's go to the next community.
Yeah, so there's a lot there, and maybe we can unpack just extremely briefly what some of those things are. So you zoom in, you have a livelihoods training, you have explanations for how to start businesses, you have a theological component that talks about working hard as also an aspect of the gospel, working hard is unto the Lord, and that we shouldn't be afraid of work, but that this is something that can be life-giving.
Right.
But then there's also medical components like vitamin A tablets, if that's right, helping people from malnutrition or maybe diseases that can kill through very inexpensive treatments, costing 50 cents or $1 in many cases. And then there's also a cash component, right? If people are starting a business, they might get like a small amount of cash, not like thousands of dollars, but like $50, $100, $200 at a time? What am I missing from this formula that goes into the magic mix?
He's really good because our program is complicated and he knows it really well. With cash specifically, I think this is something that ICM has tried to, we're really thinking, what's the thing, apex, how much do we have to invest to see maximum impact? And if you just train and don't give anything, there is some benefit, right? And then if you just train and then give $200 to a family, okay, well, you're gonna see obviously some difference, but is it worth that extra $200? And so our kind of standard practice has been to do what we call micro loans, but we do them in the form of an actual business kit, like the physical stuff. So it might be, this week we're learning to make like a little cake, and we're gonna, whoever wants to try that business, like here's the materials, and it's usually about $3 of worth of stuff, and it is a micro loan, so they do pay it back to ICM. But we've also obviously been looking at a lot of the research around give directly and giving cash grants and experimenting with, is $50 good? Is it better to do it as a group loan for the whole community and everyone pitches in? Should we try 3 people? And the results honestly are to put it mildly, confusing, because this is a whole other topic, but measuring the income of the poor is very, 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 very difficult. And I don't think anyone in the world is doing it well, including Professor Dean Carlin. He's doing it as best as he can, but who's one of the leading economists in this space who we work with. So on cash specifically and how much we give, we're trying to do what's best. But when your whole program costs $100 for a family, giving an extra $100 means you're cutting in half the number of people that you can give the program to. So these are the kind of questions that we as an organization weigh up.
Yeah, that helps give a bit more context about like why this exact number, $100 out of a hat, but it seems like you're trying to find an optimum, like just the right cost, the right amount of benefit that you can scale for, millions of people you've helped so far?
2.2 million.
2.2 million people have received the Transform specifically. Wow, that's incredible. And Dean Carlin, just to humble brag, you didn't mention, I'll brag for you. So Dean Carlin is the former chief economist of USAID. He also worked with Michael Kramer, Nobel Prize winning economist, doing a lot of the randomista development. So when we talk about RCT, that's kind of a jargony word, but basically it's an academic approach that involves just applying the treatment at random to know that you're not actually confusing correlation with causation. And if you want to hear more, you should talk to an economist, but it's really a helpful approach that lets us know really what changes are we causing. And there's some RCT evidence that Transform is almost doubling the income of the ultra poor. Now that might not sound like much if it's just 50 cents or $1 a person, but to that person, it really does do a lot. Maybe what's some of the change that you've seen? Maybe some stories you could share of people who've been transformed by Transform.
Yeah, so I think, when people ask ICM, what's your definition of success for someone who comes through your programs, it's not, that they can drive a Prius, right? Like that, and so I think we have to think about what does that look like for us. Anyone who graduates our program and does really, really well will still be in extreme poverty. There are other organizations who are experts at helping people in extreme poverty. What we want people to be able to achieve is having 3 meals a day that they can pay with some vegetables and some protein. And so because a lot of Filipinos eat plain rice every meal, 365 days a year. And so knowing where your food is coming from, and then also having savings and having the agency to either join a group business or start your own personal business, or get some training to be able to get employment. On the health side, basic health knowledge, so knowing how to wash your hands and having access to those basic things, and also knowing what the government resources are and how to access those things, and so we do some of that. In terms of stories, my husband and I have spent our life listening to stories of people that have been through this work, and they're not all amazing. Some people are average, some of us are average, but there was a lady who I was talking to recently who was part of one of the savings groups. And so the savings groups is kind of on the economic side, is the financial sustainability side, where people commit to save together. And you'd think, how does someone who's living on 50 cents per person per day have any money to save? But when a group kind of all hold each other to save together, they find ways to, and it's about, 8 pence per week they save. When they get started, and as these groups grow and mature and they loan against their savings or they invest together, then they see they can grow quite sizably. And there was a lady who I was talking to who was still really poor. She was living, I think she'd been in her savings group for 2 years, and they lived on about $1 per person per day in their family. But she said she now saves a third of her income. And I was like, what? Like, she saves a third of her income, and she says she often will actually decide herself to skip breakfast or skip a meal, because she said, now I get it. Now I know that if I save today and I invest it, like, it's going to pay off for my children's futures. And she has already now bought a piece of land. She's built her own house. She was saving at that time. She was saving for a motorbike. And these are things which she would not have had. She didn't have any access to anywhere to save before, and she didn't have the hope that was possible. So these are some of the things that we're seeing in people's lives.
Yeah. Maybe one or two more stories of people that have been really moving to you through the work of Transform.
Who remembers COVID? COVID in the Philippines was really, really tough. And the Philippines is actually an interesting economy generally, because it's now it's not a low-income country, it's a middle-income country. And so if you go to Manila and you go to certain parts of the country, you'd be like, there's no poverty here. And so what happens is, because it's a country of 7,000 islands and a very decentralized government, you often have policy set by people in Manila who are very well-meaning, but never been out. I've seen a lot more of the country than they have, and it's not a boast, it's just true. And so they're coming up with these policies in Manila of whatever the health thing is going to be in education. And so during COVID, the Department of Education said, let's go to online learning, because that's what everyone else in the Western world seems to be doing. And for kids who, there's 7 in them in the house, 7 of them in the family, and the house is about this big, and there's no electricity, and that obviously is a ridiculous proposition already. And so there was one young man who he was actually part of the children's choir, so I've known him for 15 years now. He'd dropped in and out of school, and he'd had a really hard time, wasn't very academic, but he was studying during COVID. He was in his 3rd year of university, and he had gotten himself like a tablet thing to do his education online during COVID, but his house had no signal. And so it's like, what do? He either has a choice, right? Don't do it, drop out again, and or figure it out. And so he would walk. If anyone's been to the Philippines, it's basically a tropical climate. He would take his iPad, he would walk into the sugarcane fields until he got signal. It was about 36, 37 degrees, heat of the sun, and he would sit there for hours a day, and he would try to get, and he now graduated, and when I saw the photos of him in his uniform, I couldn't help but cry. But just, I think it's again that mindset of, okay, now I see the value, now I have this mindset shift, I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm just thinking of the health side. I'm sure some more will come to mind.
Sure. So thank you for submitting questions. Please upvote your favorite questions. I'm going to go through these. There are 15 questions, so if we want to hit them all, we're going to have to do like 30-second answers.
All right, here we go.
So first, how did you decide which countries to work in? And do you think the approach needs to change in different continents?
Yeah, we've had lots of long meetings about this, so this is more than a 30-second answer. But basically for ICM, the key is the local church. Going to a place where there's, of course, ultra poverty and people in greatest need, with a strong church network that ICM can either help to convene or that's already convened. We're non-denominational, so we tend to work through Protestant churches. And then just practicality of language. We're an English-speaking organization, and we work in Guatemala, and that's challenging. And so we've kind of said, maybe let's stay in countries where there's a bit more English spoken. And because we're actually looking at doing a multi-country RCT, we were looking for sort of quite diverse countries in terms of culture and different backgrounds. Yes, the curriculum itself and the program has to be contextualized, but about 85, I would say, out of the 85% probably of the curriculum is the same concepts. Some is obviously in Africa. AIDS is a problem where it's not in the Philippines, and so there's a bit of that. And we're a learn by doing organization, so we don't sit and think about it for 3 years and say, what's the exact lesson? We just go and start, collect data, and then say, okay, this lesson obviously didn't seem to be working. Next batch, it's 4 months batch, next batch, let's just do a different version and test and see what works.
Nice. So there are multiple large NGOs working in the Philippines. Do you coordinate with them or work in different, you do work in many different communities, but what's your interaction with other NGOs in the Philippines?
Yeah, this has been a tough one for us at ICM because we're all about scale, and for us, scaling well means doing everything the same everywhere you go. So when you start having localized partnerships, it complicates sort of that. We have done work with Philippine government now is trying to do a lot better in terms of what they can offer cooperatives and education and health. So what we've actually started to see is there's no other NGO which is in all the places that we are. We would love it if there was like a microfinance organization which was everywhere we were, so we could say, hey, look, these are our top groups who are doing well on the business side. You graduate now to this organization. It seems to be more like we're creating linkages to government programs. We're much smaller in the other countries where we are, and so we are just thinking about what that looks like for us. But I think because serving the ultra poor is very different to serving the extreme poor, we see like there's not enough organizations who have that expertise also, and so we're trying to go and be in all the places where the ultra poor are.
So that's interesting. What makes it different serving somebody on 50 cents a day versus serving somebody who lives on $1 a day? Because to me, both sound like unimaginably difficult, but like for people between those experiences, what's different and what's different for helping?
Yeah. There's an acronym GIDA, Geographically Isolated and Dispersed Areas, GIDAs, which basically means the poorest people live in the hardest to reach places. And so there's a practicality issue, which a lot of organizations just say it's so expensive to get a social worker out there. No one wants to live there. So they just say, let's stay in closer areas. And people in those more urban areas tend to just have higher incomes anyway. So that's the practicality, a geographical issue. And then there's really the issue of poverty and isolation tend to go together also in terms of even within a community. The poorest people would be the least connected and so would have the least opportunity to access things. And so that sort of perpetuates itself as well, right? They won't get picked for the government program. They'll be off the list for the malnutrition treatment. And so it's just much harder to reach those people, and even ICM needs to do better at get even better at targeting and making sure that we have the poorest people in our programs. So there's an opportunity cost to set up. And then I think it's harder to help people who are, like I was explaining about that sense of hopelessness and worthlessness. Like it's harder to, I think, give them a boost compared to someone who's kind of already seeing like, I've got a successful business which is running or I'm in employment.
So it seems like with a lot of global development charities, there's this challenge of measuring into the far future, not just 1 year, but like 3 years, 5 years. I know with cash transfers and Give Directly, that's been a theme. They definitely have a big impact after a year, but we're not sure after 5 years. How about for ICM? It seems like the results you shared, one of the questions mentions, is at 1 year. Do you have ideas about 3 or 5 years after?
For RCTs, we haven't done, I think we do 18-month post-transform, which is 22 months after we say hello to people. The data we have on that is more, we've had a Bruce Wittick came and did a study on our education program, which was, we did a kindergarten intervention, and he studied at basically the entry to high school, and he saw a huge difference just in the educational attainment, not only of the child who we were able to serve, but the whole family. So that was really interesting. That was on the education side. Obviously, that has repercussions into our child's whole future, earning potential, and that kind of thing. On the savings group side, we don't have counterfactual data. We only have our own operational data, but we see savings groups, once they graduate from Transform, the group itself would have saved about $80 US as a group, which is, modest but meaningful. Average group at 5 years has about $1,100 US dollars of capital. So just seeing groups who stay involved and stay invested, our operational data shows great impact.
So if the average group saves like $1,000 after a year and there's like 10 million saved, you have now roughly something like 5,000 or 10,000 savings groups, each with around 1,000 saved?
Yeah, we've got, I think, what was my number, 55,000 something groups.
Yeah.
And some of them are, they just graduated, so they've got $80. But yeah,
right.
It's, average, well, we can talk about averages and what they mean, but yeah.
Interesting. So that's like 5,000 or 10,000 little communities that now have insurance, basically. Like 5,000 or 10,000 communities that if something tragic were to happen, they could dip into the savings group and be provided for. Yeah,
it's insurance, but it's also capital. And one of our big strategic goals for the next few years is how to help people access that capital better and how to use it. And when we started savings groups, we didn't think they were going to be this successful, and we thought it would be more of the emergency thing. And now it's like, well, they've got all these assets. Actually, our training isn't really teaching them how to invest it well, either individually or as a group. So that's a big strategic focus for us.
So how did you get into working for ICM as a career?
Everybody look at that man, that's why. So my husband, Michał, was, I'll give a quick intro to him. He was an athlete, went to the US on a full scholarship. He's from Poland originally, and once he graduated, he had a film degree. He went back to Poland and was like looking for a purpose in life. And his friend who he had studied with, who is now living in Hong Kong, said, hey, come and spend 6 months in Hong Kong. And so Michał met David Sutherland, who's the chairman of ICM, on a Tuesday. And by Friday, he was in the Philippines shooting videos for ICM. And this was before we were married. We did a long distance relationship and have a very long romantic story if anyone wants to hear it. But,
yeah, definitely, yeah.
But we'll do another session. So we got married in 2009, and Michał had been splitting his time between working in the Philippines and shooting these videos. And I kind of was seeing what he was doing as we were doing this long distance relationship. And I had always, as you saw, I was a singer. I always wanted to go and study music, and I chose a music school in Sydney when we got married. And so in 2009, we went to Australia and lived in Sydney, and I was studying music. Michał was working in TV for a local church. And about 6 months into I thought I was doing a 3-year music course. And about 6 months into this course, Michał said, I think we're a bit too comfortable, and being this comfortable makes me uncomfortable. And he said, I think once you get done with this first year, we should go to the Philippines for 6 months and we should go on an adventure. And we weren't even necessarily thinking about ICM. And I was like, sure, that sounds fun. I would want to go on an adventure to the Philippines. I'd seen kind of some of what he had done with ICM. And literally as this 20-year-old, we went and moved to Bacolod City, and I fell in love with the ministry. I fell in love with the country. I fell in love with these kids that I started. That's when I started the choir, which was kind of like a mini ministry within the bigger ministry. And at the time, ICM was quite a small organization and didn't really have marketing or a good website, or there was no paid sort of. Our chairman paid us out of his own pocket, kind of just pocket money, so that we could live and eat. And as the organization grew, we kind of just had to upskill and stay one step ahead. And I never knew I would be doing this work. I never knew a job like this existed. And, I don't want to make it sound rosier than it is. Not every day is fun, but just that being able to connect the talents that God's given you and what you're passionate about. And we're kind of strange, we work alongside each other every day. Yeah. For a married couple, I think that was one of the questions you kind of said, or maybe I should prepare to talk about, is what's it like working alongside your spouse?
Yeah.
We love it. It's not for everyone, but for us, it's really a joy to kind of have a ministry together and travel and work. And one challenge is it's hard to switch off from work and just have, okay, we're not talking about work tonight, and then you start thinking of, what about this and what about that, and yeah.
Yeah. So we all know about digital nomads. You guys are kind of like NGO nomads. So you have, correct me if I'm wrong, you have an apartment in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
You have a house or someplace in Poland where your family is, and you're there about 3 months of the year. And then you're from London, so you're often in London with fundraisers or just other things. But then you do these fundraising banquets in the US. And you do that on the East Coast, maybe on the West Coast too, I don't know. And so you're not really ever in one place.
Yeah.
And it's been that way for like 10 years?
Yeah.
Like how does that work? It just seems like maybe some people are wired that way. They're able to, be multi-homed, or I wouldn't say homeless, but addressless. Share more about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's odd. Like, my mom still is like, how do you do it? And I'm like, I don't, like, no one's really telling us where to go. Like, there are some events where we say, like, okay, we definitely have to be at this. And, like, we are to a large extent in control of our schedule and our time. And I think there's a deep spiritual answer, which is that, we're home wherever we're at home, but that's not very practical. I think the fact that we're together means that, like, a lot of people who travel for work, like, I've got to be home at the weekend. I don't want to have, more than this many days away for work. Like, I know that's important, but because it's us and we don't have kids, that's never happened for us. And so having kids would be like, whoa, we have to change a lot of things. So I think we really have the privilege of seeing very up close the work that we do, like really sitting with people and crying with them or laughing with them, making jokes with them, and also seeing some of the world's really, really wealthy people and being able to be a bridge builder between those two worlds. And I think that is really a privilege, very strange. Like, we've had a day where we've been in like a very, very, very rough urban community in Cebu where I felt unsafe, and that doesn't happen very often at all. Like, it really visually confronting. And then that evening stepped onto a $100 million yacht. And you just kind of go like, okay, Lord, this is weird. And, but the privilege to see God's creation and all of that, and the humanity of everyone in that, and like, hey, actually, these people are probably happier than these people.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a bit. So if it wasn't already clear, in your role, you're doing a lot of fundraising, you're doing a lot of marketing, you're doing a lot of storytelling, you're doing a lot of travel. There's not a lot of Westerners who work at ICM. It's just, 1-2 dozen people?
Less, like 7 of us.
And yet you work with tens of thousands of pastors in the Philippines, and you might have hundreds of people in the Philippines who
about 500 staff who are all indigenous. Yeah.
So really, there's, in terms of like administrative, there's a lot of things that you and just a small handful of people handle. And so you're flying everywhere all the time. You're straddling between the ultra poor communities in the Philippines and a $100 million yacht on the other hand.
Yeah, not every day.
But it's a big whiplash, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so anything you've learned, any insights you've learned from that kind of straddling or whiplash?
Humor is really important, both sides. I think often when you look at, or when you think about the poor, it's so easy to just see them as slightly less than, and the way that communications and marketing and statistic work have been done tend to dehumanize, right, or tend and look down. And I think there was when you have that. There's a quote about, I think it was C.S. Lewis who said, when you make a friend, it's like, oh, what, you too? Right? And when you have that with someone who lives on 50 cents a day, you're like, oh, you too? Like, you also think that's hilarious, or you love that song, or you dream about that, or you fell in love the same way that I did. Like, that's like very precious, right? And to just realize, like, okay, it sounds almost something that you shouldn't have to say, right? But that we're all the same. We're all different, but we're all the same. So that's one thing which I learned very early on in just hanging out with people who were so poor was, hey, we're the same. And I think kind of on the other side of just looking at people who are very, very wealthy, it's interesting that, wealth doesn't necessarily go with wisdom in terms of giving. So I feel like I've been given quite a privilege often to help educate some of the, like, I respect these people so much in terms of the business and where they've gotten with their families and all these different things. And then they come, visit us in the Philippines. They have no idea about, how to invest well in the poor and different things. And so that's been hard for me because I'm not particularly, I know I'm sitting on the stage, but I'm not particularly an outspoken person or I don't want to correct people a lot. And so that's something I've had to kind of just sit in my authority that's been given to me by God and just say, hey, I can challenge people on things and I should. And just thinking, there's one thing which as people come and visit us in the Philippines, often like we have a lot of Hong Kong families who come and they are these, high-powered parents and they're like, I want my kids to come and visit ICM so they'll be grateful, and it's all about like, I want my kids to see so they're grateful. And I think that's amazing that children can come or young people can come and learn and see and experience.
But you want the adults to
But
go.
it's like, God also please change their hearts and their minds. So,
Yeah. That's funny how like successful business people, they make it, they think they have all the answers.
Yeah.
And then there's also a lot that like, they have their like ruthless strategizing hat on when they're doing business. And then they want to take a break from that when they do charity. They're just like, I just want to give to wherever my heart goes.
Yeah.
And so there's like no attention to detail.
Yeah.
They take that hat off,
Yeah.
which is regrettable. And we just have a couple more minutes, so really as brief as possible. What is it really ICM that does differently that makes it more cost effective than other Christian charities that might work in the Philippines? Maybe some of us are familiar with like World Vision or Compassion, maybe they do child sponsorship, or maybe they give people goats or give people things. How would you summarize what's different about ICM?
Yeah, I've touched on it. One is the local church. We don't have to pay for a building. We don't have to pay for volunteers. We don't have to pay for a social worker. There's so many things which the church is desperate to provide to show God's love to people. So leveraging that is amazing. We hire, all of our staff are local and many of them grew up in poverty themselves, which helps us in two ways. One is, they're able to be paid modest salaries, but two is they're way better trainers than if I was to go in with a master's degree in public health and teach someone how to breastfeed. So Indigenous staffing and the local church. And then just a relentless commitment to every line item on your budget and saying, hey, is there a cheaper way to do this? And like this year, it's been a difficult year for lots of organizations. We lost one grant from USAID, which is, we don't have a big cash buffer. And so it's been a really difficult year. And so our branch officers who are already very humble are now, we said, is there a way you can operate without an office? And can you get together in a local church, for your morning meetings and then go out to the field? Can you not do vans? Can you do motorbikes? So we really do have this relentless commitment to like, there could be a cheaper way to do it. Let's try.
Yeah. So there's a lot more questions. I think we'll have to do a podcast and hit these other questions. But thank you all for those, by the way.
Thank you.
And I want to just close with a question for advice for those in the room. Like for those of us discerning a career in development, what general high-level advice do you have? What skills to build? What experiences? Should they go to the Philippines? Should they go with you guys to the Philippines and see what's happening? I know you have trips for that, but what general advice?
Get really good at what you want to do, I think is one thing. I did end up going to university, but I studied journalism, which I was kind of doing every day. So charities need people who are good at what they do. We don't like, that's, I think, just being excellent at what you do. If it's finance, if it's law, if it's media, whatever it is, get really good at it. And if that means getting 5-10 years corporate experience, that can be really helpful because you also bring then with you a different perspective. You will take a pay cut if you're coming from the corporate world to the charity world. So it's worth it, I would say, but you will take a pay cut. And in terms of looking for a specific organization, I think, yes, please come and visit ICM anytime you can get in touch with us. There's not a perfect organization, and I think I kind of said at the beginning, like, don't tie yourself in knots in saying, like, God, is this the right one? Is this the best use of my time? I think, we can be wise and look at impact and look for organizations which are having an impact, but I think, faithful serving is really, really valuable. And, I didn't think I would be with ICM for 15 years, but I think just becoming an expert in this particular part of ultra poverty and these interventions, and then being able to advocate for them well, and not saying, okay, I'm going to do 2 years at this organization and 2 years at this one. I think that's been a blessing to our bosses, and so I think kind of that, just make your best bet, use your best judgment about what's probably a really good use of your time, be good at what you do, serve faithfully, and of course always, if God calls you out to something, he has to make it pretty obvious.
Wow. Yes, thank you so much. One more round of applause for Louise.